The neon lights of New Singapore's underground district painted everything in harsh blues and reds, turning the rain-slicked streets into rivers of artificial twilight. Nathan Reed pulled his collar higher against the synthetic downpour, cursing the climate engineer's idea of atmospheric authenticity. The entrance to the Stellar Remnants auction house lay hidden behind a holographic advertisement for synthetic noodles, exactly where his contact said it would be. Nathan wasn't supposed to be here. His salvage license specifically prohibited participation in gray market auctions, but his scanner had picked up something impossible during his last run through the Kuiper Belt: quantum signatures that shouldn't exist in this arm of the galaxy. When his old friend Marcus sent him the catalog for tonight's auction, Nathan's suspicions were confirmed. Someone had found something they shouldn't have. The security scan tingled across his skin as he stepped through the hidden doorway. A bored-looking woman with silver cybernetic eyes barely glanced at his credentials before waving him through. The auction room smelled of expensive tobacco and cheaper anxiety, filled with the kind of people who made their living in the spaces between legality and profit. Lot 89, the auctioneer announced, his augmented voice carrying through the haze. Origin unknown. Quantum signature suggests pre-collapse technology. Starting bid, 50,000 credits. Nathan's heart rate spiked. The object on the display platform matched the readings from his salvage run, a sleek pod of impossible metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its surface rippled with patterns that hurt his eyes if he looked too long, like watching water flow in 4 dimensions. 100,000, called a voice from the shadows. Nathan turned to see a tall woman in a corporate stealth suit, her features obscured by ambient scrambling tech. The logo on her collar belonged to the Stellaris Foundation, one of those megacorps that claimed to work for humanity's future while burying its secrets. Nathan knew he should walk away. His entire ship wasn't worth what they were bidding. But the pod's patterns had started moving faster, as if responding to the attention. No one else seemed to notice. 150, he heard himself say. The corporate woman's head snapped toward him, her scrambled features impossible to read. 200, she countered immediately. The pod's surface was definitely reacting now, the patterns forming and reforming in what almost looked like writing. Nathan's augmented vision tried to analyze it but kept glitching, showing impossible equations. 250. His voice stayed steady despite the pounding in his chest. The credit chip in his pocket held everything he'd saved over 10 years of salvage work, meant for a ship upgrade he'd been planning forever. The corporate woman took a step forward. 300,000. Her voice carried a warning. Nathan watched the patterns on the pod spell out something that looked like a plea. Or maybe a promise. The translation software in his neural link crashed trying to process it. 500,000, he said, and felt the room go silent. It was every credit he had, plus credit lines he'd have to scramble to cover. The corporate woman's hand twitched toward what was probably a concealed weapon. 500,000 to number 47, the auctioneer said quickly, clearly wanting to close the sale before anything got messy. Sold. Nathan felt the corporate woman's invisible stare as he approached the platform to claim his purchase. You don't know what you're involving yourself in, she said softly as he passed. Story of my life, Nathan replied, keeping his voice light despite the ice in his veins. The pod's surface calmed as he approached, the patterns settling into a gentle swirl. Up close, he could see his reflection fractured across its surface, split into 1,000 possible versions of himself. Getting it back to his ship proved surprisingly easy, too easy. The auction house's loader drones transferred it efficiently, and no one tried to jump him in the rain-dark streets. It wasn't until he was sealing his ship's cargo bay that his security systems picked up the first intrusion attempt. Multiple hull breach attempts detected, his ship's AI announced. Security forces approaching. Corporate signatures detected. Nathan swore and ran to the pod, now pulsing with urgent patterns. His scanner showed him what he'd suspected. It wasn't just a container, it was a stasis chamber. And it was failing. The pod's surface suddenly liquefied under his hands, becoming transparent. Inside, suspended in what looked like liquid starlight, was a woman. No, not a woman, her features were too perfect, her skin a pale blue that shifted like auroral lights. Her eyes snapped open, solid silver from edge to edge, and met his. "Help me," a voice said inside his head. "Please." Alarms blared as security forces began cutting through his outer doors. Nathan had about 30 seconds to make a decision that would probably get him killed. He reached for the pod's control surface, and the future rewrote itself in starlight. Nathan's ship burst through New Singapore's atmospheric shield, leaving the pursuing corporate vessels scattered in its wake. His unscheduled departure had triggered every automated defense system in the station, but the mysterious woman's touch on his ship's controls had somehow turned them all blind. They flew through a corridor of electronic silence, invisible to everything but the naked eye. "They can't track us now," she said, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight as she worked the navigation console with impossible grace. Her accent made standard English sound like music. "But they'll guess our trajectory once they realize what I am." "And what exactly are you?" Nathan asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he watched her pilot his ship better than he ever had. The quantum patterns that had covered her stasis pod now flickered across her skin, making her blue complexion shimmer like the surface of an alien ocean. She turned those mirror eyes to him, and he felt the weight of centuries in her gaze. "My name is Liana. I was, to be the next stellar architect of the Luminari." Her fingers danced across the console, bringing up star charts he'd never seen before. "My people built the quantum arrays that keep your solar system stable. Or at least, we did before the star started dying." Nathan's augmented vision tried to make sense of the charts she'd pulled up, showing stellar configurations that shouldn't have been possible. "I've never heard of the Luminari." "You wouldn't have. We've been gone from this galaxy for 3,000 years. A sad smile crossed her perfect features. "My ancestors believed that staying hidden was the only way to protect our knowledge. They were wrong." The ship's sensors suddenly screamed warnings. A massive energy signature had appeared behind them, a corporate dreadnought dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Nathan started to engage evasive maneuvers, but Liana's hand on his arm stopped him. "They're not trying to catch us," she said softly. "They're trying to stop me from reaching the archive." She brought up another star chart, showing a region of space that seemed to bend around itself. "My people, we found a way to encode living memory into quantum states. To preserve not just information, but experience, consciousness itself. The archive contains everything we were, everything we knew." "And you're what, their backup plan?" Nathan watched the dreadnought launch smaller pursuit craft. They were still out of range, but not for long. Liana's patterns pulsed faster. "I'm their last hope. The neutron star that's consuming our home system, it's not a natural phenomenon. Someone engineered its collapse, turned it into a weapon. The Council refused to believe it until it was too late. Her voice caught. "They chose to stay, to maintain our traditions even as the radiation began to kill them. But some of us believed survival was more important than tradition." Nathan's ship shuddered as the first long-range shots from the pursuit craft scattered around them. "And the Stellaris Foundation? What do they want with you?" "What every empire wants, control." Liana's fingers blurred across the controls, and suddenly they were diving through subspace, the stars stretching into lines around them. "My stasis pod contained more than just me. It holds the key to quantum engineering on a solar scale. Imagine being able to stabilize dying stars, or move them entirely. To reshape reality at its most fundamental level. That's..." Nathan tried to grasp the implications. "That's why they were willing to pay so much at the auction. That kind of power would make them gods," Liana finished. Or demons. My people learned the hard way that having power doesn't grant the wisdom to use it. She turned to him, and Nathan saw fear crack through her perfect composure. I didn't choose you randomly at the auction, Nathan Reed. I was conscious in that pod, scanning everyone who approached. You were the only one whose thoughts weren't filled with greed or ambition when you saw me. You just wanted to understand. The ship's AI interrupted with another warning. Somehow, the pursuit craft had matched their subspace trajectory. Multiple vessels approaching. Energy signatures suggest weapons armed. Nathan checked their fuel reserves. The quantum-assisted escape had drained them more than he'd thought. We can't outrun them forever. We don't have to. Lyanna's patterns formed complex geometries across her skin. There's a place, a research outpost my people abandoned centuries ago. The archive is there, hidden in the quantum fabric of space itself. We just have to reach it before they catch us or... She met his eyes again, and this time he saw the pain she'd been hiding. Or before the cascade failure in my stasis pod's containment field kills me. The quantum patterns you see? They're not just decorative. They're holding me together. Without the pod support, I have perhaps 40 hours before my consciousness destabilizes completely. Nathan felt the weight of the moment settle onto his shoulders. Everything he'd worked for, his whole life in the salvage business, had led him to this choice. How far to the outpost? At maximum sustainable speed? 39 hours. He reached past her and pushed the engines past their safety limits. The ship groaned in protest as reality blurred around them. Then we'd better stop wasting time. Lyanna's smile was like watching a star ignite. She pressed her hand to the console, and Nathan's ship suddenly thrummed with power he didn't know it possessed. The pursuit craft fell behind as they raced against time itself, leaving light and reason bent in their wake. Nathan tried not to think about the corporate armies surely mobilizing behind them, or the impossible physics keeping his mysterious passenger alive. Instead, he watched the time display counting down their remaining hours together, and wondered when exactly saving her had become more important than saving himself. The Helios mining colony looked like a collection of metal mushrooms sprouting from the surface of asteroid 2547. Nathan guided his ship through the maze of extraction towers and processing plants, following the encrypted coordinates his old friend Raven had sent. As they descended into one of the maintenance hangars, Lyanna's quantum patterns flickered dangerously, their light growing dimmer. 26 hours remaining, she whispered, her silver eyes dulled with pain. The journey had taken more from her than she'd admitted. Without the stasis pod's full support, the quantum energies that formed her true self were slowly unraveling. The hangar door sealed behind them with a hiss of pressurization. Nathan helped Lyanna from the pilot's seat, trying to ignore how right it felt when she leaned against him. Her skin was cool to the touch, like holding a piece of starlight. Well, a voice echoed through the hangar. When you said you needed help hiding from corporate killers, I thought you were exaggerating. Raven stepped from the shadows, her dark skin decorated with flowing circuits of golden tech tattoos. She stopped short when she saw Lyanna. Holy shit, Nathan. What did you get yourself into? It's a long story, Nathan started, but Lyanna stepped forward, her patterns brightening briefly. We don't have time for long stories, she said. The quantum signature of my stasis pod will have been detected by now. The Stellaris Foundation's agents will be here within hours. I need your help to decode the genetic database hidden in its matrix. Raven's tech tattoos pulsed as she ran a scan. You're not human, she said unnecessarily. Those patterns, their quantum entanglement made visible. You're literally held together by modified spacetime. And she's coming apart, Nathan added. Can you help? Raven ran her hands through her short-cropped hair. My lab's this way. But Nathan. She grabbed his arm as Lyanna walked ahead. If what I'm reading is right, she's not just alien tech. She's something that shouldn't be possible. The lab was a chaos of holographic displays and salvaged equipment. Raven had always been a genius at making incompatible technologies work together. She interfaced the stasis pod with her systems while Nathan watched Lyanna grow progressively weaker. The database is encrypted, Raven announced after an hour of work. But not just with codes. It's quantum-locked to specific genetic markers. Only someone with Luminari DNA can access it. Then we've failed, Lyanna said softly. Her patterns were now so faint they barely illuminated her blue skin. Even if we reach the archive, I won't survive long enough to transfer the data. Nathan caught her as she stumbled, holding her close. There has to be another way. Raven, what about Dash? An alarm cut him off. Multiple ships entering the asteroid's orbit, Raven's security system announced. Corporate signatures detected. How did they find us so quickly? Nathan helped Lyanna to a chair while Raven's fingers flew across her interfaces. They didn't, Raven said grimly. They're not heading for us. They're setting up a blockade around the whole asteroid. They don't know exactly where we are, but they know we're here. She pulled up a tactical display. 5 capital ships, dozens of fighters. They're not letting anything leave. Lyanna touched one of the screens, her fingers leaving traces of quantum light. The database. I never told you what it really contains. Her voice had grown weaker, but her silver eyes burned with intensity. It's not just scientific knowledge. It's a map to where my people went. Nathan and Raven both stared at her. What do you mean? Nathan asked. You said your people stayed in the dying system. Most did. But some escaped. The ones who knew about the weapon, who tried to warn the council. Her patterns swirled with memory. They found a way to fold space itself, to hide in the quantum foam between realities. The database contains their coordinates, and the key to reaching them. She laughed softly. The Stellaris Foundation thinks they're chasing weapon schematics, but they're really hunting refugees. Raven's tattoos flickered as she processed this. That's why the encryption is genetic. It's a beacon for survivors. An insurance against our knowledge falling into the wrong hands. Lyanna's hand found Nathan's. My people were hunted once before, eons ago. We learned to hide our greatest secrets in plain sight. The stasis pod, the database, even my own genetic structure, they're all parts of a key that can only work if freely given, never taken. Nathan felt the pieces click together. The auction. You wanted to be found, but only by someone who would help you willingly. He remembered how the pod's patterns had called to him. You were conscious the whole time, testing everyone who approached. Yes. Lyanna's fingers intertwined with his. But I'm dying, Nathan. The quantum matrix that maintains my consciousness is degrading faster than calculated. Even if we reach the archive. No. Nathan surprised himself with the force of his response. We're not giving up. Raven, the pod's internal matrix, can you stabilize it? Raven was already moving. Maybe. The technology's way beyond me, but if Lyanna can guide me through it. The next hours were a blur of desperate work. While corporate ships tightened their net above, they fought to rebuild the pod's containment field. Lyanna grew weaker as she talked Raven through incomprehensible quantum mechanics, her voice fading even as her brilliant mind remained sharp. Nathan stayed by her side, supporting her when she faltered, watching in awe as she and Raven merged impossible technologies. He found himself memorizing everything about her, the way her patterns danced when she concentrated, how her accent grew stronger when she was excited, the feel of her cool skin against his. Nathan, she whispered during a break in the work. If I don't. He pressed his forehead to hers, feeling the quantum energies that made her unique pulse against his skin. Save your strength. We're going to fix this. She smiled that starlight smile. My people were wrong to hide for so long. There's so much humanity could teach us about hope, about fighting impossible odds. Her patterns briefly brightened. About love. Before Nathan could respond, proximity alarms screamed through the lab. On Raven's screens, a new ship appeared, larger than the others, bearing markings he'd hoped never to see again. The Stellaris Foundation's flagship, Raven breathed. That's the head of their Special Projects division up there. They're done waiting. Nathan looked at the partially rebuilt stasis pod, then at Lyanna's fading form. They were out of time, and he was about to make another impossible choice. The first explosion rocked the asteroid's surface just as Raven finished the stasis pod's emergency repairs. Through the lab's reinforced windows, Nathan watched corporate drop ships descend like metallic wasps, disgorging armed teams onto the mining colony's outer platforms. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore, Raven muttered, her tech tattoos pulsing with agitation as she monitored their approach. Standard sweep and clear pattern. They'll reach us in 10 minutes. Lyanna stood shakily, her quantum patterns briefly stabilized by the jury-rigged field generator they'd built from the pod's remnants. The pod's matrix isn't strong enough to maintain full stasis anymore, she said, but it should keep me coherent long enough to reach the archive. Her silver eyes met Nathan's. If we can get past that blockade. Nathan looked at the tactical display, mind racing. 5 capital ships, dozens of fighters, and now ground forces, the Stellaris Foundation had committed serious resources to capturing Lyanna. The mining colony's legitimate residents were being evacuated, which meant civilians wouldn't be caught in the crossfire. Small mercy. We need a diversion, he said finally. Something big enough to split their forces. He turned to Raven. The quantum drive from my ship, could you rig it to overload? Raven's eyes widened as she caught his meaning. You want to create a localized spacetime disruption? That's insane. Her tattoos flickered as she ran calculations. But, theoretically possible. The blast would temporarily disable their targeting systems, maybe even create a blind spot in their blockade. Do it, Nathan said. But we'll need more than that. He faced Lyanna. You said your people learned to hide their greatest secrets in plain sight. What if we did the opposite? Made ourselves so visible they can't look straight at us? A ghost of her starlight smile crossed Lyanna's face. The quantum patterns that comprise my consciousness, they could be amplified. Turned outward instead of inward. She touched the field generator at her waist. It would drain what little stability I have left, but... No, Nathan started to protest, but she pressed cool fingers to his lips. Trust me, she whispered. Like I trusted you. The next minutes passed in a blur of desperate preparation. Raven worked on the quantum drive while Nathan transferred essential systems to his ship's backup computers. Corporate forces were systematically sealing off sections of the colony, getting closer to their position with each passing moment. Ready, Raven announced, stepping back from the now humming drive. When this blows, it'll create a quantum shockwave that'll scramble everything in a 1,000-kilometer radius. But we'll only have seconds before their systems adapt. Nathan helped Lyanna toward his ship, trying not to notice how she felt lighter than before, as if she was already beginning to fade from reality. The archive coordinates are locked in, he said. Are you sure about this? No, Lyanna admitted with a faint laugh. But my people spent millennia hiding from the universe. Perhaps it's time for some of us to stand in the light. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers leaving traces of quantum energy on his skin. Whatever happens, Nathan Reed, know that you gave me something worth far more than survival. Before he could respond, proximity alarms shrieked. The lab's reinforced door began to glow red as cutting tools started working on the other side. Time to go, Raven said, initiating the quantum drive's overload sequence. The explosion will trigger in 60 seconds. Get to your ship. She hesitated, then hugged Nathan fiercely. "Try not to die, okay? You too." Nathan pulled back. "The backup plan? Already in motion. Now go." Nathan and Lyanna reached his ship just as the lab door began to melt. Through the opening gap, he caught glimpses of corporate tactical armor and weapons that probably violated several treaties. They sealed themselves in the cockpit as the first shots rang out. 30 seconds to overload, Raven's voice came through the comm, "Better hold on to something." Lyanna's patterns began to pulse faster, brighter, until she was nearly painful to look at directly. The quantum energy spread from her body to encompass the ship, making reality itself bend around them. Nathan's augmented vision crashed trying to process what he was seeing. 10 seconds. Nathan took Lyanna's hand, feeling the future crystallize around them. Together? Together. The quantum drive detonated. For a moment, existence itself seemed to hiccup. Nathan felt his consciousness stretch like taffy, aware of multiple possible versions of himself existing simultaneously. Through it all, Lyanna's hand anchored him to what was real. Then reality snapped back into focus. Warning klaxons blared as every system in the ship screamed alerts. The corporate blockade was in chaos, ships firing blindly as their sensors tried to compensate for the quantum disruption. And in the center of it all, Lyanna burned like a newborn star. The quantum patterns that defined her had expanded to fill the space around their ship, creating a brilliant display that overwhelmed every sensor in range. They were a target that was impossible to miss, and therefore impossible to track. Corporate targeting systems, designed to detect and analyze specific signatures, were blinded by the excess of data. Now. Lyanna's voice echoed strangely, as if coming from multiple directions at once. The ship leaped forward, riding waves of distorted spacetime between the capital ships. Corporate fighters spun in confusion, unable to lock onto something that registered as being everywhere at once. They were halfway through the blockade when the first coherent response came. The Stellaris Foundation's flagship, larger than the other ships combined, launched a barrage of quantum-tipped missiles, weapons that shouldn't have existed outside of theoretical research. "They're using my people's own technology," Lyanna said, her voice growing fainter. The brilliant display around their ship flickered. "The missiles can track quantum signatures. They'll follow us through any evasion pattern." Nathan watched the approaching warheads with growing horror. How long until they hit? 90 seconds. Maybe less. Her patterns dimmed further. The archive coordinates were still 20 minutes out at maximum speed. Then we changed the game. Nathan began powering up the experimental drive modifications he and Raven had installed years ago, the ones that had cost him his official pilot's license. "Your people learned to hide in the quantum foam between realities. Let's see if we can do it the hard way." The missiles closed in as Nathan pushed his ship beyond its design limits, diving between dimensions where physics became more suggestion than law. Lyanna's quantum display began to merge with the fabric of spacetime itself, creating a wake of possibility through which they flew. Behind them, the corporate blockade grew more desperate, their weapons' fire becoming increasingly erratic. But ahead, something impossible began to take shape, a fold in reality that shouldn't have existed, marking the location of the archive. They were going to make it. Then Lyanna collapsed. Nathan caught Lyanna as she fell, her quantum patterns now barely visible against her fading blue skin. The ship's sensors screamed warnings about the approaching missiles while reality twisted around them, torn between dimensions by his desperate maneuvers. "Stay with me," he whispered, cradling her as the autopilot struggled to maintain their course. Her silver eyes flickered open, but the starlight within them was dimming. "The archive," she breathed. "We're so close. I can feel it." Her hand trembled as she reached for the console, leaving traces of quantum energy that formed into familiar patterns, the same ones he'd first seen on the stasis pod. The missiles were 30 seconds from impact when everything changed. Space itself seemed to unfold before them, revealing a structure that defied comprehension. The archive wasn't a station or a ship, it was a quantum construct the size of a small moon, built from crystallized possibility. Its surface rippled with the same patterns that covered Lyanna's skin, but on a massive scale. "Beautiful," Lyanna whispered. "They did it. They actually built it." Her patterns briefly flared as she recognized her people's work. The pursuing missiles suddenly detonated, caught in the archive's defensive fields. Behind them, the corporate ships that had followed them through the dimensional fold found themselves frozen in quantum stasis, trapped between moments of time. But Nathan barely noticed their salvation. Lyanna's body was growing transparent, the quantum energies that maintained her consciousness dissolving into the space around them. "No," he said fiercely. "We made it. You can't." She smiled that impossible starlight smile one last time. "My people are here, Nathan. I can sense them. Not just records or memories, but alive. Hidden in the quantum matrix of the archive itself." Her hand touched his face. "Thank you for showing me that some things are worth risking everything for." Her form began to dissipate completely, but before Nathan could cry out in denial, something extraordinary happened. The archive's surface patterns synchronized with Lyanna's fading quantum signature. A beam of pure possibility struck their ship, enveloping them both in crystalline light. Nathan felt his consciousness expand, touching other minds, other realities. He saw the truth of the Luminari, not just refugees, but pioneers who had evolved beyond physical form. The archive wasn't just a database or a hiding place. It was a chrysalis, waiting for the right moment to emerge. In that eternal instant, he understood. Lyanna wasn't dying. She was transforming. The quantum energy that had been struggling to hold her physical form together now reshaped itself according to its true nature. Where Lyanna had been, a being of pure light and possibility took shape. Her silver eyes remained, but now they were windows into a universe of potential. The Stellaris Foundation sought weapons, her voice echoed in his mind. But my people's greatest achievement was learning to exist in harmony with the quantum nature of reality itself. Her new form moved closer, still recognizably her but now unfettered by physical constraints. We waited for someone who could bridge the gap between what was and what could be. Through their connected consciousness, Nathan saw the full scope of what was happening. The archive was awakening, and with it, the thousands of Luminari who had chosen to evolve rather than perish. But they weren't looking to reclaim their past dominion. They had learned too much during their long hibernation. "My people need guides," Lyanna said. "Those who understand both the physical and quantum realms. We have power and knowledge, but you humans, you have something we lost long ago. The ability to embrace uncertainty. To leap into the unknown not because it's logical, but because it's right." She extended a hand formed of light and possibility. "Stay with me, Nathan Reed. Help me show my people how to rejoin the universe not as hidden gods, but as fellow travelers." Nathan looked at her transformed being, remembering the otherworldly woman he'd first seen in the stasis pod. She was even more beautiful now, raw potential given consciousness and purpose. He thought of his life before, the endless salvage runs, the quiet desperation of searching for something meaningful in other people's discards. He took her hand. The transformation wasn't physical, he remained human, flesh and blood and wonderfully limited. But his consciousness expanded, allowing him to perceive the quantum realm as she did. To see the infinite possibilities in every moment, while still appreciating the beauty of choosing just one. Together, they watched as the archive unfurled like a cosmic flower, revealing the hidden civilization within. The corporate ships hung helpless as the Luminari emerged from their quantum chrysalis, no longer hiding but ready to share their knowledge with those worthy of trust. "What now?" Nathan asked, still holding Lyanna's transformed hand as realities danced around them. Her response came with the brilliance of a supernova. Now we build something new. Not luminary, not human, but a future neither of us could have imagined alone. Her consciousness entwined with his. After all, isn't that what love is? The choice to create something greater than ourselves? As the archive's quantum arrays began transmitting peace offers to Earth's governments, as the corporate ships retreated in confusion, as the first teams of human scientists approached with wonder rather than weapons, Nathan and Lyanna stood at the threshold between worlds. Physical and quantum. Past and future. Limitation and possibility. They had found each other in an abandoned stasis pod at a back-alley auction. They had trusted when logic said to fear, hoped when reason said to despair. And in doing so, they had helped birth a new chapter in the story of two civilizations. Some treasures, Nathan realized, were too precious to be measured in credits. Some auctions were won not by the highest bidder, but by the heart most ready to believe in impossible things. Lyanna's quantum form pulsed with joy as she sensed his thoughts. Around them, the archive hummed with the potential of countless new beginnings. They stepped forward together into a future bright with starlight, last edited 1 minute ago.